Happy politics, and welcome to another edition of BC Poly Hot Stove. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, and you're looking live at the bright lights of my living room and kitchen table. I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
It's Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the Mighty ICPA, live in
And
Metrotown.
speaking of mighty, there's a seg for you, and one that hurts me a little bit. But I'm going to give it to you.
McLean, let me ask you a question. Do you like pina coladas?
Well, I like the
Getting
prose. I
caught
like
in
pina
the
coladas
rain.
and prose. Yes.
For some reason, that's the Canuck victory song this year, but I'm all in. I believe now in Bo Horvat.
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I did not know that was their victory song. I had never seen all the way to the end.
I don't know why it is, but they go into the dressing room and that's what's playing, and it is the worst song in human history, but we love it, and we are going to go with it.
Fair enough. And hey, congratulations to you. The second round of the playoffs is usually where, as a Flames fan, when I lose interest.
Yeah.
And indeed, this year is the same. But the Canucks have a very exciting team, and I thought they were going to lose to St. Louis. I did, and they're hanging in there with Vegas.
This year's been different for me because my 10-year-old now is old enough to really participate in Canuck Mania. He's a big hockey fan. But I did make him crack up during the first round when I said that Johnny Gaudreau is the kind of a kid who's getting dunked in the pool by the other teams at the hotel during the tournament. So he thought that was very funny because he's dunked kids in the pool, I think, during tournaments. So anyways, enough Canuck talk. Let's just say we're not dead yet. Who knows what could happen?
Not dead yet. If we had another topic that I'm not going to seg to after that. So instead, let's talk about another time you were right.
Yes.
Let's talk about this past weekend. The Conservative Party of Canada, and I guess the official opposition now has a new leader in Erin O'Toole. And if viewers/listeners will be so good as to queue up our last edition of Hot Stove, it kind of played out exactly the way you predicted. Full credit to you.
Well, I am a CPC member. I'm not an active volunteer or anything like that, but I did have a vote in this thing. And certainly, in social media, generally you kind of swim in your own circle and you see what's going on. I knew Leslyn Lewis was coming out very strong in the late going. I think if this campaign went on another month, and I think if, honestly, she had a better handle on French, I think she would be the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. But I think this is actually a better spot for her. Dr. Lewis, very impressive resume, but listening to her interviews, sound bites, she wasn't quite ready for the cut and thrust of the Ottawa media, especially when it comes to how they handle Conservatives. So Erin O'Toole, good choice. I actually like that he's not terribly well known to Canadians. I think that gives him an opportunity to introduce himself. He was a Veterans Affairs Minister under Stephen Harper, by the way, former Canadian Forces member, former lawyer as well. So very smart guy, very disciplined guy. While he was Veteran Affairs Minister under Harper, he doesn't have that same tightness with Harper that maybe Peter MacKay did. And it kind of went how I expected. And I think Dr. Lewis is well positioned, as the Orca predicted many months ago, to be the next leader.
Yeah, that was Doug Furby who wrote that piece. And it's interesting because I know Doug pretty well. He used to be my editor at the Calgary Herald. And I don't believe Doug is a conservative. And he's certainly not. He's been in journalism so long, he hasn't been a member of a party for a long time. But he was pretty accurate there, too. And his take was that Leslyn Lewis, we're watching somebody who might well be the next leader, but not going to be this leader for the reasons that you just laid out, which I think are true.
Yeah, hey, and most impressively, you and I, having worked on campaigns from time to time, she raised $2 million during this campaign at a time where campaign, it used to be, you kind of just go to a few shadowy guys and they give you $2 million, no problems. Now, though, you actually got to work the grassroots. $2 million, very impressive feat by her. She'll be in high demand on the speaking circuit for Conservatives. And, another high-profile, very intelligent woman to go along with the Candice Bergens, the Michelle Rempel-Garners. Lisa Rate's out of politics now, but Lisa Rate still seems to be hanging around every major Conservative Party event. So lots of talent there. And, someone asked me, Maclean, what was it about her that I thought resonated? She won Langley, where I live, for example. What resonated for people? I think, honestly, it was this idea that you could put a woman of color up against Justin Trudeau and none of the usual attacks would work. How is he going to go after her for being pro-life? like she just says, look, everyone on the stage with a uterus, put up your hand. Like maybe I can decide for myself what I want to be, Mr. Prime Minister. How is the Prime Minister best known for, or worst known for, blackface? Going to put up with a black Canadian woman on the stage. Like, it just would have been incredibly delicious. The only problem was she didn't know French, and there's so many seats in Quebec. And you just get in the sound bites, she didn't have it down to the tweetable, 280 character sound bites. That's stuff you can learn. It's stuff she got better at as the campaign went on. And like I said, if this went on another month, maybe she had a little bit better command of French, it could have been a whole different story.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the person who will be the leader of the official opposition. One of two people, arguably the leader of the opposition, and maybe Chrystia Freeland, who would be the sort of odds-on favorite to be the next prime minister. So you're right, a certain amount of polish and those skills, and my God, French, even just like entry level, are just necessary. And like you say, these are all learnable skills.
Yeah, and incredibly intelligent woman. I mean, she has an environmental law degree. She has all these different, she's a PhD. So French is just another challenge that she'll tackle. I like the idea, I forget where I heard it, but I like the idea of her kind of going a little bit underground on her French for a couple of years and kind of poo-pooing like, well, it's hard, and then just kind of showing up 2 years from now with like mastery of the language, and I think that would be kind of hilarious. So we will see. I will say this, you can already see Justin Trudeau's retooling, going to a re-O'Tooling of his,
yeah, that's good.
Today he's jumped in with $2 billion for schools, for provinces. The media, judging by the questions, weren't having much of that this morning. They find that to be very questionable. Why now? Why not, a month ago when provinces are making the plan, why are you funding provincial initiatives? Why are you getting involved? Why are you trying to pretend to be the white knight? Can I say white knight for a guy who's had blackface problems? Is that allowed?
Yeah, yes, in a chess context.
Okay,
yes.
So, why are you rushing in? And then the best question of all, Mr. Trudeau, you've talked as a former teacher about concerns, and you've heard from parents. Are you sending your kids back to school? And there was hemming and hawing and no answer. So the media is shifting on Mr. Trudeau. They are less than impressed all of a sudden, and the proverbial shiver that went up the leg, Obama-like for a lot of these media back in the day, seems to have subsided. So looking forward to seeing the Prime Minister actually being held to much harder account this fall.
Well, and the Obama shiver, which I think is actually a pretty good way of putting it, was always going to dissipate. I mean, it had to.
Yeah.
And the next thing that we have two public health crises that I want to talk about. And I want to start with COVID just because I think there's a good bridge there. And that I think that in some ways Canada is hamstrung because we always understandably compare ourselves to the United States, which has not handled COVID very well. And so Canada has looked really good by comparison. But there have been problems. There have been mistakes, especially in Quebec, which were at a U.S. state would be among the worst, actually. This is just true. And so, yeah, some of the shine, some of the Obama shiver on the federal government and Justin Trudeau in particular was always going to dissipate. But I want to talk about COVID in terms of BC and Dr. Bonnie Henry. There's been a lot of nervousness, a lot of trepidation lately as the numbers have creeped up. And again, I would say understandably, but Dr. Bonnie Henry has stayed firm on things like the schools reopening. Yeah. There's been some pushback there, and I guess today, in a couple hours, actually, we're going to get the announcement from the Education Ministry on how exactly that's going to go. Dr. Bonnie Henry's been firm. Schools are going to open.
Yeah. Dr. Bonnie does not seem as concerned as the media whinging at question time for her in her twice-a-week briefings. In fact, she took a vacation. Congratulations to Dr. Bonnie for actually getting away. Adrian Dix, you should do the same. No offense, but you got to have decision fatigue at some point and take a week and relax. The schools reopening is interesting. Fleming will talk today. It's almost irrelevant what he says at this point. It's every school, I believe it's today, has a deadline to present their plan to the parents in those schools. So we're avidly waiting for the two schools that our three kids go to. We've already heard we've seen the school district has sent out their plans, and now the schools are kind of chopping them up. Maclean, I have a kid going into grade 12 this year who was devastated yesterday because some of the implications and fallout of what all this all means has started to come out. So for example, because you're now cohorting kids she's not able to take what's called Gator leadership, which is a chance to mentor younger students because they won't be in her cohort. That's gone. She's not able to help out with Gator, by the way, it's the Walnut Grove Gators, which is why they call it Gator. Anyways, she's not able to do. She's part of a team that welcomes grade 8 students in every year. They have a barbecue and a dance, and they take them around to classes and do orientation for them the first week, stuff like that. That's all gone because you can't mix these cohorts up, in all likelihood. So we're starting to see the fallout of this, and just like the grads from last year, it's devastating. It's very discouraging for kids who have spent 4 years building to this point. Now in their grade 12 year, which is one of the best years of your life, a lot of fun, and usually, I mean, all things considered, as far as schools go, there's all this fallout now, and so I think there'll be a lot of. I think it'll be interesting because I think parents will be nervous. They'll see the precautions, and I think they'll feel okay about the precautions that are being taken. Kids, though, now are going to see the fallout of what this means, and I think for a lot of them, there'll be a lot of disappointment about it. But back to Dr. Bonnie. Not only is she sticking on the school reopening, she's also reopening kids' sports even more. That's right. I wrote a piece for the Orca earlier this year called, what could hockey look like in COVID? This was during the depths of the COVID lockdown, and we were all very depressed. And the thought of kids playing, like you almost had to put them in spacesuits to go out there against each other in a hockey game, for example. That was the thought. Now, though, it's opening up. She's moved it to phase 3. She's moved it to phase 3 at a time where our numbers are trending up, even among young people. Or especially among young people. So you're like, okay, she's not worried about it. She says this is within range. She doesn't seem to be catching her by surprise. She's comfortable with the hospital numbers. They've gone up, but only 22 people in hospital. There's more than enough hospital capacity to take care of it. The whole bottom of the Vancouver Convention Center, remember, is still a hospital in waiting just in case. It's all there. They can move in tomorrow if they had to, but they're not even close to filling a small percentage of the beds that are already available. So, we've put a lot of faith in Dr. Bonnie this far. So, I'm going to go with it, and I'm excited to see my kid hopefully play some hockey games this fall, and it's certainly expedited a little bit quicker than I think we had thought.
As a quick aside, and this will be a quick aside, did you see the interview with the guy in Victoria who had hosted the 2 parties 2 nights in a row? Did you see this?
Yes, and meme, was it you who put out the meme of the, no. Someone put out a meme of like the creepy looking backwards hat guy that's always on in those memes, and they're like, dude, this is actually him, and it kind of looked like it.
That's you just have to shake your head. I don't have anything to offer other than so he's being evicted. I understand because he hosted 2 illegal parties in 2 nights.
That would do it. By the way, let me just give a shout out to Mike Farnworth. Farney is not. There's a lot of politicians in BC who have very, very thin skins, and I suspect most of the NDP MLAs, including the premiers, probably long muted me on Twitter. They don't want to hear from me. That's fine. Not Farney. God bless him. When Farney came out with the $2,000 fines, Mike Farnworth, member, I think, for POCO, Solicitor General of this great province, the top cop, as we used to call Rich Coleman when he was in that job. Farney comes out with these $2,000 fines for COVID partying. And I retweeted it and put a little message like, I remember when Farney was fun, man, And he liked the tweet. It's a small thing, but he has a sense of humor. Like, he's like... Farney remembers when he used to be fine, right? Like, this isn't like, it wasn't his dream coming into politics. I want to fine people $2,000 for getting together with friends and family. No, this is just the situation he finds himself in. And one day, I'd love to see the record scratch, like a Saved by the Bell style, where Mike Farnworth looks at the camera and says, you guys might be wondering how I got here. Like, yeah.
Yep, that's me.
That's Farney.
It's hard to dislike anyone who's having an avid cantaloupe growing contest with Tom Fletcher via Twitter. I mean, what's not to like?
It's so great. It's so great, and kudos to him for having a sense of humor about himself in this situation where he's found himself in. So it's another reason why Farney, of all the dippers, is the best liked of them on the BC Liberal side, and I suspect in the Green Caucus as well.
I mentioned we have 2 public health crises we should talk about. The other one is, well, it's more sobering. The numbers they're frightening. I'm talking about the opioid overdose crisis. BC's had a couple of record months in a row. There was a report yesterday indicating that the overdoses are responsible for more deaths in BC than I think homicide, suicide, car crashes, and COVID-19 combined.
Yeah.
That is staggering. And so far, the response has been underwhelming. We don't have anything like this sort of collected, coordinated response we've had to COVID-19, marshaling of resources, indeed locking down entire sectors of the economy, most of the economy. What's happened with the opioid crisis? Not nothing, but not nearly enough.
Well, I've been tweeting about this the last couple of days. Let's recap the summer John Horgan's had on this file. 3 months of record overdoses.
Yes.
Garth Mullins, who is like not an ICBA person, not a BC Liberal person, as far from that as you can imagine, head of one of the drug network advocacy groups. He and 3 others quitting Horgan's response team. And like the quote is, it's the most amazing quote I've ever heard. "I'm not going to stand at an open hole digging a grave with John Horgan," said Garth Mullins. "They derive a lot of legitimacy from having drug users and activists at the table, but honestly, they don't have a plan." This isn't being reported by the, Orca or the so-called, right-wing media conspiracy or any of these other groups, the post-millennial or Andrew Scheer's favorite True North, which I frankly never heard of. But whatever.
All right.
This is being reported by the Tyee. Like, this is the NDP House organ. And they're saying, guys, like, you're dropping the ball. I'm not going to stand at an open hole digging a grave with John Horgan. Now, Maclean, I am not a person who believes that the provincial government has a hell of a lot of control over this issue. This is an epidemic. There are things that can be done, but I don't generally hold government of any stripe accountable for that. But there is someone in British Columbia who does hold government accountable for it and who has held government accountable for it, and his name is John Horgan. Horgan in opposition, page after page of quotes here of him blaming Christy Clark and the BC Liberals for the opioid crisis and promising things would be better under an NDP government. And guess what? They're worse than ever. Go to my Twitter feed at Jordan Bateman. You can read some of these quotes from him, but it's pretty simple. "It's time for some real action," he says in 2016. "Why is our provincial government unable to meet the needs of people and families desperate to find help when it comes to opioid addiction? Addiction won't wait for this government to catch up. Every day that goes by, more lives are lost. British Columbians can't afford to wait any longer for this province to get a new government that actually addresses the problems people face. Addictions don't wait, and the fentanyl overdose numbers make this clear." Yeah, tough talk in 2016, opposition leader John Horgan, and today, record overdoses. So by your own standards, you have to be held accountable. You said this was a Christy Clark problem. You said the BC Liberals were screwing up this file. You said more could be done, and it's worse than ever on your watch. You have a ministry. My favorite quote, I haven't actually rolled it out yet on Twitter, is one of these dippers, Melanie Mark. Sorry, the proportional representation expert, Melanie Mark, advanced education minister. She comes out and says, essentially, as Christy Clark said before she became premier, the blame for a lack of resources must always lie at the political level. Christy Clark made a choice, a political choice. John Horgan's made a choice, a political choice. It's to fund his spin doctor office and Jeff Megg's operation, $11 million a year at the office of the premier, and to fund mental health and addictions for $10 million a year. So you tell me what the choice is your premier has made, Melanie Mark. This is happening in your neighborhood, Melanie Mark. Are you holding your premier to account? I don't know how Judy Darcy is still the minister for this file. Record overdoses 3 months in a row. That is a fireable offense by John Horgan's own standards here. It's also a fireable offense for the premier of this province because he said the last premier should be fired for this, and her numbers were better than his. So COVID or no COVID, something has got to be done. When you set out the standard that it's the buck stops on the premier's desk, you have to be held accountable for it. And Keith Baldry this morning tweets out, I don't know why this doesn't get the same attention as other crises. Keith, you're the press gallery. You and Vaughn are the deans of the press gallery. If you want to get more attention, you can make it get a hell of a lot more attention. Hold John Horgan to account for the same things that he held Christy Clark. Hoist him on his own petard, as Shakespeare said. Let's see it. I'm tired of this. This is a big issue. construction had higher than regular numbers on this, than the average industry, because we have a lot of young men who self-medicate, and it's not great. This is an issue that we talk about constantly with our companies. We're pouring more money into mental health help, into addiction help. We're trying our best on this side, but again, I wasn't the one who said government should be held responsible for this. John Horgan was, and I hope the press gallery wakes up and actually holds them accountable, and I hope that they are going hard after him on this, because people are dying in record numbers every month, and I'm tired of head-shaking tweets about it.
Well, I'm not John Horgan, but I'm squirming. I mean, that's I don't know what to say. You're right. This is a crisis. People are dying literally on the streets. And it is especially hard to take given the laudable and frankly very impressive marshaling of resources that happened with COVID-19. But this, there's this sort of throwing hands up in the air and saying, well, it's sad, but, and then it trails off after there. And Jody Vance wrote a piece this morning saying basically like there are that's it. No more plans, no more studies, do something. Even if it doesn't work, try something. Yeah. And she had a couple of ideas and said, look, these may not be good ideas, but like they're ideas. And we can't have anyone studying this to death anymore because frankly, people are being studied to death. And you're right. The double standard is hard to swallow. And the NDP seem to think that they could care their way out of this crisis, because that was always the criticism that, well, the BC Liberals don't care. Christy Clark doesn't care. Yeah. They're bad people because they don't care. Well, as you say, things have gotten worse, and significantly worse. And it's the fact that there is a Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, well, it's not working, I guess, is the lesson here. Whatever has been done is not working.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And they got upset when Christy Clark said that they needed help from the federal government in order to deal with this because there were certain issues. Guess who's now blaming the federal government for everything? John Horgan, Judy Darcy, and the NDP. So again, by your own standards, you are failing. This minister is a failure and should be fired. This ministry should be funded properly and actually got, given the priority it deserves in a crisis. And John Horgan, you should look in the mirror and apologize to the people of British Columbia for your actions. And again, not just me saying it, Garth Mullins, I'm not going to stand in an open hole digging a grave with John Horgan. Like, what was what's been like the major thing from the NDP these past 3 years? Well, and the CDC and all this. Oh, well, don't use drugs alone. Make sure you have someone there who can administer the naloxone kit if you need it. And guess what we heard from the coroner this week? More people are dying together because they're getting high together and they think, well, one of us will help the other one out if it gets out of control. But they're both high and they're both dying. Yeah. They're both overdosing at the same time, groups of 2 and 3 people at a time. So they take your advice and it's still not working. And then these kits, they're not as effective as they used to be because the drugs are changing and it's taking multiple doses for paramedics. Like, God bless, like the frontline paramedics, I don't know how they do it. I do not know how they do it. And look, I'm not a guy who wants to pay government employees more money. Whatever we're paying paramedics, it's not enough. Like whatever we're paying these ambulance folks, it's not enough because they walk into these situations and you just must feel, it just must be devastating day after day after day. And they're not numb to it. I've talked to ambulance workers. Not. They are not numb to it because every day it happens again and again and again. And by his own standards, John Horgan is accountable.
Yeah, well, it's true. And you mentioned the advice of not doing drugs alone. I mean, well, we've had this, it's similar advice to having a designated driver, right? But I mean, the key is that the designated driver remains sober. Yes. I think that's the main takeaway here. Yeah. And that was the part that was just ignored. Well, there'll be safety in numbers, but only if one of you still has your wits around you.
Yeah, and it's addiction. Like, these folks don't have a choice once they're in that situation. It's addiction. They are addicted to it. And you know what? Drug users generally aren't sitting with non-drug users during those times because the non-drug users usually are trying to help them and get them out of it and stop them from doing it, right? Like, it boggles my mind that we're in this situation and that, the Horgan hypocrisy on this. Like, he's hypocritical on a lot of things, opposition to government, and every opposition leader who becomes premier is hypocritical on certain things. This one is just staggering, and I hope the press gallery nails him on it because it's not working. He made big promises in the 2017 election platform for the NDP on this, he was gonna, he wanted to have someone who woke up every morning thinking about this issue, and that's why he's gonna have a minister of it. Well, guess what? She's a failure, and Premier, I want you waking up every single morning thinking about this issue, because you know that the friends and family and loved ones of drug users are, the people who have lost loved ones in this are. You think about it every morning and come back to me when you've got a plan that works.
And she's not really, and this is no disrespect to her personally, but she's not really a minister. She's a minister of state. When you have a ministry with a smaller budget than the Premier's office, that is what we used to call a minister of state, which is like a pony ministry that is not big enough.
She gets paid like a real minister.
What's that? Sorry?
She gets paid like a real minister.
Well, you're right. Yes, absolutely. I just mean that the ministry does not have the resources to do much. And so clearly that is something else that needs to be changed. Speaking of
just before we move off Judy Darcy, it astonishes me the lack of talent in the NDP bench. For all the talk of all the fresh faces and blah, 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 who would I actually want to have working for me ever? Like maybe Dixon Farney. The rest are terrible. Eby, the least honest attempt at proportional representation. Donaldson, called on by Vaughn Palmer to be fired, rightfully so. Scott Fraser, the Scots Tots invasion of, the stabbing the Wet'suwet'en elected councils in the back. Like, these are not Claire Trevina, whose first big transportation project was paving her own island, the road to her house from the ferry. Like, these are not, Melanie Mark, who couldn't explain proportional representation. Like,
not an expert.
She's not an expert. These are not highly talented people, right? Like, and if you're John Horgan looking at this team, you're thinking to yourself, geez, and now I'm losing Carol James because she's not running again. It is thin and thinner on that front bench.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what is in the back benches to replace them. You're right. It's not a cabinet that has bathed itself in glory, and there are some weak spots.
If you're Ravi Kahlon, you must be sitting there just being like, "What the hell? Like these idiots are like," and I'm out there carrying water for everything.
Yeah, that's somebody who you'd think might get tabbed for the front bench at some point. But I think there will be a shuffle at some point because there are cabinet ministers that are not running again. And usually it makes sense to transition them out and give somebody else a chance to up their profile. And of course, when somebody realizes they aren't running again, like their care meter can only trend down, quite understandably. Yeah. So it might make sense for some.
That's an interesting question. Let's say they make it to budget time next spring, and I think they will.
Yeah, I do.
Carol James, is she the one delivering that budget? Because it's going to be bad news. I think it's going to be bad news. So is it better to put it on her and then have a different...
Yeah. I was going to say, in that case, you would keep her there. Plus, I mean, I don't think a finance minister change right then would be a good idea. But yes, if it is going to be bad news, it's okay for her to wear it.
Yeah, and look, other than Dix, who are you going to put in there? Like,
yeah,
and you're not moving You're not moving Dix off health in a COVID crisis, like.
No.
And so okay, well, thank you for letting me rant about that opioid thing. It really bothers me. My sister lives in New Westminster, and she's delivered 2 or 3 times life-saving doses of that kit. She carries one with her, and she works in an area where there's drug users, so she carries it with her, and like you save someone's life, but there's still there's an emotional toll on that feeling, on what happens there. Again, talking to ambulance and paramedics, firefighters, first responders. They're all beside themselves. And I just come back to Horgan set the standard for what a premier and a government should be doing on this file. He's articulated it, and we have to hold him account for it because he's been an abysmal failure on the file.
Yeah, and something needs to change because lives are literally at stake. Yes. I do want to mention a former Minister of Health who won awards for his work on harm reduction.
Yes.
Had a big announcement this morning. It's Terry Lake is the new head of the BC Long-Term Care Providers Association. This news is fresh as of an hour ago, so you're forgiven if you haven't heard it. But I think that's a good hire.
It's a huge get for the care providers. Listen, that's a job that it's going to be a tough job because long-term care doesn't have the most stellar reputation right now across the country. Wasn't as bad in BC as it was in other places. But they're reeling. You have a government that is an activist government wanting to peel back things from the private sector. And this job, you're in charge of protecting the private sector care bed, operators' interests. So be very interesting. Now, on the bright side, I think Lake and Dix have been fairly complimentary of each other, especially through the COVID crisis. Never heard Dix take a run at Lake. Never really heard Lake take a run at Dix. So that might be helpful. And I do think for the care providers, you're not going to find a BC. It would be tough to find someone in BC with a kind of better rep among the press gallery folks. Like Lake is considered reasonable. He's considered centrist. He wasn't considered as a Clark zealot by any means. Like even though he was definitely loyal to her. So I think that probably will help them as they try to articulate their message going forward. But I still want to talk about provincial exams.
Oh yes, because that's we're going to get some questions about that today, I expect, because in a couple of hours we have our big technical briefing and then media availability on the back to school plan. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the education minister has not yet answered questions about what was a just staggeringly bad report from the Ombudsman's office. I mean, they misled. They actively misled parents to the point that the Ombudsman, Jay Chalk, recommended that from now on, ministry statements need to be accompanied by a written guarantee that they are telling the truth. Wow.
A certificate of authenticity for media press releases. Yeah, that's a new thing. Never heard that one before.
Me neither. In fact, I kind of had to read that 2 or 3 times before it sunk in. Really?
Yes. Okay, let's talk about this. 18,000 students take 2 or 3 different provincial exams. For those of you who haven't been around schools for a long time, a provincial exam is a test you take at the year end. It's a standardized test across the province. The score is a huge component of your overall grade. I think a third or so of your overall grade for the year, and is the last piece of your transcripts before it goes on to college and post-secondary institutions. You usually write them in June. There's a flurry of marking in July, and by the end of July, those transcripts are in the hands of post-secondary institutions. Often you're accepted to a post-secondary institution, subject to your grades being okay on these transcripts. 18,000 tests happen. Thousands of tests happen, but 18,000 errors happen. A kid is in a high school in Vancouver and has been scoring 88% all year in this course. This is an actual example for me. 88% all year in his coursework, or her coursework. She goes and writes the test. She waits all month. Her post-secondary spot is dependent on her getting, a B or whatever in this course. She's got room to maneuver. She gets a 12% on the test. And no one in the BC Ministry of Education goes, that seems weird. An 88% student getting 12%. A 92% student from the same class gets a 33. They call in and say, not just the students, like parents start phoning in. Service BC is deluged with calls. Secondary school officials start call and say, listen, there's something wrong with your marking. There is no way these kids got these grades. Like it's physically impossible. We did practice tests. We know they're good. Like there is no way. You've got to go back. No, it's all good. It's all good. They revise the kid who got 33%. They remark it, send it through machine again, move it up to a 34%. Something is still wrong. So thousands of kids are calling in. Post-secondary institutions start getting these transcripts. Kids are ordering transcripts and having them sent without looking at the grades. And about 8,000 had higher grades on these tests than they should have, and about 10,000 had lower grades. And several thousand had very, very low, much lower grades. And the government covers it up. Ministry of Education, there's no other way to say it. They cover it up. They soft soap it. Oh, well, it's only a few things. There's been an issue, but we're recalculating. They don't explain what the issue is or what it means for transcripts. Kids still paying for transcripts to be sent to college all through this. They notify post-secondary education. Don't worry, we've notified all post-secondary institutions. No, you've notified 24 of the 135 that are on the list getting these transcripts. Of the 24 they do contact, they don't actually, it's just a little note at the end of the raw transcript files. It's not actually like a call to them saying, hold up, they're flawed, wait. It goes on for weeks. And they put out a press release, everything's fine, everything's hunky-dory, and it turns out the ombudsperson just shreds them. Maclean, the only F that was deserved on this provincial exam was John Horgan and Rob Fleming's Ministry of Education. They get the F. And I don't know how the minister still has his, you speak of ministers who should be fired. How does a minister have his job when he cannot oversee the single, this should be easy. And now we have to have a certificate of authenticity for press releases being sent out by the Ministry of Education to know whether or not they're actually being truthful. That is your Ministry of Education at work. That is the Ministry of Education under Rob Fleming. And not me, Patty Backus, noted non-Orca person, noted non-right-winger, Patty Backus, former head of the Vancouver School District, as left can be, who hates the BC Liberals for all their for firing her as a school trustee. Patty Backus came out and said Rob Fleming's a disaster and should be fired. How do you disagree?
Well, I was going to say the worst part. That's not true. The worst part is the messing with the futures of all these kids and lying about it. But the part that's hardest to understand is that if you're Rob Fleming or high up ministry staff and this mistake happens, and it would have been so easy to say, look, there's a machine error, something broke.
Yeah.
And we haven't figured out exactly the extent of it yet, but just so you're aware. No one is right in their right mind is going to blame Rob Fleming or the chief of staff of the ministry because a marking machine broke, which is it's kind of reminiscent of what happened with the Conservative leadership vote on Sunday. I mean, are you blaming the president of the Conservative Party because the machine broke? Not. I mean, come on, no, obviously not. Things break. That would have been so easy.
Yeah.
It would have been, but that's sometimes the instinct is to obfuscate and to push aside and deny and to try and buy time. And in this case, it just made it worse. They gambled and lost. But had they just said, yeah, there's an error, the machine broke or whatever it was, I think more people would have been more understanding and less astonished.
Yeah, the machine broke. And we're holding all transcripts back until we find out, until we get it marked right, because we owe it to these students to make sure they have the correct grades. Pretty simple. Instead, we get the cover-up, and the ombudsperson politely calls it misleading the public. It's lying to the public. We say misleading so that you don't get sued, although I don't know what the ombudsperson's worried about. But they lied to the public. They covered it up. They tried to keep it under wraps, and it wasn't that big a deal. Just a handful of tests. 18,000 tests. Like I said, I have a grade 12. Going in grade 12 this year. The provincial exams are very important for her future, and I would be incensed by this. And the funny thing is summer, it's August, no one's really paying attention. But you actually tell the story to a parent, they go crazy. They go nuts.
Yeah.
And the BC Liberals should be telling this story over and over again. I hope the media rake Rob Fleming over the coals. I hope someone asks him why he's still the Minister of Education today when this happened on his watch. Like in the old days, there was a nobility in politics. You fell on your sword if your underlings failed. Not anymore, and I guess not in a minority government, and not when you're trying to cling to power. But yeah, it's one of the. There have been a few damning reports over the years. Like I think, who was the Auditor General who moved to Australia? John Doyle.
Oh, John Doyle.
Doyle kind of broke the mold for reports. They used to be all very polite, and then Doyle started hammering away, and then these other watch people folks, independent advisors, suddenly realized, oh hey, if I have pithier quotes and spicier quotes, like John Doyle or Mary Trapel Lafon was great at it too, I'll get more coverage, then the issue will get resolved. This is a spicy meatball full of quotes right here.
It is. And, we'll see. We'll find out today. I think that there was a lot of people, you're going to ask why it didn't get more attention. I think it took a couple days to sort of absorb it all. I remember getting the email from the Speaker's office saying, here's the Ombudsperson's report on errors with, exam markings, and my first thought was,
yeah.
Who
cares?
I don't. Yeah. And then so later that day you read it and you're kind of going, wait, what?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And it's as you say, it's a spicy meatball, and so I think that's part of it. And it's it's the end of August.
Are you saying Darryl Plecas should have a sound effect at the bottom of important emails like this? That's like Gary Bettman at the draft. You're gonna want to hear this. Maybe he should have a disclaimer. Yeah.
Because the Speaker's office does send out a lot of stuff like this, as they should. Yeah. But this one was, it's not the Speaker's office role to politicize or underline things, but this would be one case when maybe they should have.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. But listen, anyone who has a kid who's just gone through provincials or is about to go through provincials, you got to be super concerned that this is the kind of shenanigans the ministry is going on. It sort of makes you wonder, like, he's not clear as to, the ombudsperson isn't clear. Has this happened before? Like, was this just a one-off because of the way that one test was constructed? Or is it plausible it's happened before? There's no quality assurance. There's no quality assurance program within the ministry. There was no way for someone who actually saw the results coming in and got tipped off that things were bad. There was no one for them to report to. Like, we need to relook at this. Like, it was a failure on so many levels. But yeah, you're right. The certificate of authenticity for news releases is just a whole new layer.
I mean, you can only imagine what the opposition in the NDP in opposition would make of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the minister would be, his head would be rolling.
And the final news item this week is that there is no next week. There's 2 weeks after. Don't worry.
You don't want to talk about your Danish. You don't want to talk about your Danish journalist.
Oh, right. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, my God. Yes, thank you. Sorry. I completely forgot. I do want to talk about this. A little hubbub online over a Danish documentarian, we'll call him, who had been invited by several First Nations to do work on an anti-Trans Mountain documentary, was denied entry at YVR, told his job was not essential and he should go home. There was some, I'm going to call it almost half-hearted indignation because, I mean, it was, some of the usual suspects saying, oh, it's outrageous and and journalism's an essential service, and well, Canadian journalism is. Yeah. Here's the problem: is there's a pandemic, and he's even if you want to dispute that this gentleman is an activist or a journalist or a documentarian, doesn't matter. He works in radio. Mm-hmm. That is the very definition of journalism that you can do remotely by Zoom or telephone. Yeah. We, those of us who are members of the press gallery, are expressly prohibited from attending briefings and that in person. We can't go to the press gallery and pin down John Horgan. We're not allowed. And so the idea that this Danish documentarian was it was vital for him to come to the country and do his work was just in radio. It defies. Yeah. I almost forgot about it because it was so funny when it happened, and there are people saying, well, if you support TMX, you're going to think this is fun, and if you're opposed it, then you're going to be outraged because fascism. But even that was half-hearted because, as I say, it's kind of hard to argue with the pandemic.
Yeah. First of all, when I think Danish radio people, I think Shane Woodford, and a shout out to you, yes. Shane. But no, like, this guy's not a journalist. He's been arrested several times for his activism. We believe in freedom of the press, but it's not like this is an issue that we need a Danish activist in order to bring attention to. It's the friggin' Trans Mountain Pipeline. There's been more ink and digital pixels spilled on this project than any other project in Canadian history. It's been covered and recovered and re-recovered. There are no fresh angles anymore on the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Like, this is completely non-essential. Good on the Canadian Border Services for sending them back in. Shame on this journalist for not having your ducks in a row. Like, make the call before you go. I bet you the journalist activist did. Knew he was going to get turned back and thought, well, I'll go anyways. A couple $1,000s and I get some good publicity out of it. There's no need for this kind of person to be coming in right now. And we can't go to the States. We can't go anywhere. Like, why should this person be able to traverse borders to kick the crap out of Canadian energy in a documentary where he's clearly already made up his mind?
Well, I don't even care about that part. It's radio. You can do it all. Do your work, sir. Yeah. Make your documentary. Do everything that you intended to do with the people that invited you to come to Canada to do it. Just do it the way we're doing everything right now.
Hell, talk to Woodford. He'll give you his Rolodex. I'm sure Woodford will open his Rolodex and give you all of our phone numbers.
Like it's radio. Yeah. It would be one thing, and I would still agree, but it'd be one thing if he was a TV documentarian and wanted needed camera shots and all that. But yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't mean to short circuit the close of the show, but I knew you wanted to rant on that, and I've had a couple of good ones already today.
You're quite right, and thank you, because I guess it's funny. I talked about ministers that are leaving because their care meter is trending down, and then I dropped the ball at the end of my hot stove before vacation.
I do not consider that. I do not consider that a resignable offense for you. I think you're okay.
Thank you, because we tried a hot stove shuffle, and that we got complaints, so we're not going to do that again. Next week I will be away, and we will not be doing hot stove.
I will also be away.
Pardon me?
I will also be away. Yes. But we're not in each other's bubble, so.
No, it's okay. And I don't know about you, but I am shutting down. I am literally no, I'm going to deactivate notifications on my phone for everything except like text messages. I am not planning on turning on the computer once. I am going to sit outside. I am going to wade in the Pacific, and I'm going to play with my son. And that is pretty much it for a week.
So if you want to slander Maclean, at MacleanK on Twitter, this is the week to do it. No, I'm also I'm deleting Twitter and Facebook from my phone for the week because it's just it's too. I mean, it's just too much of a habit, right? Like you pick up your phone, you click on there and see what's going on, and then I'll end up in some random argument with some rando with 0 followers. Yeah. It's not worth it. It's my vacation. No. Let's get out of here.
I agree. And Jody wrote beautifully about what happens when you delete Twitter from your phone, and I think Facebook as well, but she meant specifically Twitter, and I didn't do it, but I'm not going to delete Twitter because I'm too lazy, to be honest, but I'm going to turn off the notifications, which is very easy to do. And so I will see you back. We'll see each other in 2 weeks.
It'll be great. Right after Labor Day.
That's right. I hadn't even thought of that. Until then, you can find all of our other podcasts, including this one, at all of your favorite spots: Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, of course, the mothership on the orca.ca. Until then, and not next week, I am at MacleanK. He's at Jordan Bateman, and in 2 weeks, you can harass us there. Until then, happy politics.
Go Canucks, go.